What I think will be the most attractive selling points of Toree 3D and its sequel, Toree 2, are their charming, at times alarming, throwback aesthetics, and their marked $1 price tags per title. Developer Siactro makes an offer that's hard to refuse, affordable little platformers with cute and quote-unquote weird elements, calling back to the chipper brand of early 3D mascots that ran and jumped prominently within the beloved PS1 to N64 generation. But looking past these simple appeals, retro nostalgia, and a quickly produced game that won't hurt your wallet, are a pair of games packed with surprises and personal touch. Not just a cheap trick, but an easy sell and then some. Toree is a budget tribute to the most jagged, crudely polygonal, retroactively haunted era of gaming, but it also happens to be a super precise platformer built for modern speedrunning enjoyment. The main hook for me was its tight controls, a run and jump button scheme that's incredibly receptive. Jumping is instant to perform. Toree easily maintains their original running speed from a leap, reliably turns with a loose perimeter, and can starkly change their direction in midair with a double jump. And said double jump can be performed from any height. The game is so adamant in letting you perform jumps whenever, wherever feels manageable, to a point that one of its secret techniques involves pulling off a primary jump just as you leave a ledge, giving you the chance to fill in a double jump too. Straight up some Donkey Kong Country roll jump tech up in this 3D game, it's awesome. The inclusion of a run button may seem redundant for a 3D platformer already controlled by an analog stick, but again, selling a platformer that boasts affordable yet pinpoint gameplay speaks to me as an inspired choice. Toree doesn't build or lose momentum from environments, so their only option to reach top speed is with the hold of a button, retooling the analog stick as a means for accurate steering. Having both speed and steering pigeonholed in this way, rather than have it all purely mapped to the stick, puts more urgency on the player's ability to manipulate both at once, squarely making the difference between a sloppy run and an accurate one. A tight control combo that feels perfectly tailored for a speedrunning game. The movement is also complemented with full camera control, letting the player fully direct Toree's raceway. Run and jump are by default mapped to the face buttons, so you can't control the camera with the right stick while running and jumping with one thumb. Considering the number of sharp turns and angles to catch in Toree, this can be finicky to work with at first. Recent updates added horizontal camera movement with the left and right bumpers, and a quick camera centering button that do alleviate this problem, making the default controls manageable. But ultimately, I decided to use Steam's built-in button remapping to map run and jump to the left and right bumpers respectively. I recommend doing this, even with the Switch's equivalent, to whatever you feel will give you both avatar control and camera direction comfortably, because with that figured out, you get a very workable platformer, one that makes up for its lack of acrobatic options by having both sides of gameplay precision at your command, making a good feeling tribute to early 3D while also being transparent about its archaic points is a tough balancing act, but one that I think Toree nails pretty neatly. A game world with eerily saturated looks, disturbingly artifacting textures up close, and of course the horror stuff lurking about, is home to a jolly little character that controls quicker and more fluidly than any other I can immediately think of, coming out of it with a nice tribute to the subset of platformers that did stand out for their precision, velocity, and linear perfectionism. Some of my favorite video games, and Toree is fast-paced in a similar way, prioritizing flow, keeping the pace and training your muscle memory on replays, especially when you have the leeway of the controls to make it possible. Toree's levels at a glance amount to angular floating obstacle courses with a very clear-cut way to perform them, but they're also laid out in an open space and with controls this amendable, so being able to cut corners and avoid areas that would waste optimal running time not only feels possible, but also intended to checklist the game's S-rank requirements at every goal. The game initially tasks you with collecting every star in a level, a good set of beginner breadcrumbs to test your dexterity, but then challenges you on repeat runs with how quickly you can get to the end and achieve a high rank. These are steep part times that often require more than just a seamless run, but even some tricky tactics to barely scrape by. I also want to praise the theming of the levels. The Toree duology may have classic fantasy level tropes, But you also get radically urban scenes like vaulting across city skyscrapers, boat carrier platforms lifted by a giant octopus in the center, with the return of Metal Harbor yet again, and midnight highways surrounded by neon signs and bustling with traffic that's begging to be bounced across. I've always been charmed at the concept of taking real-world archetypes and embarrassing them with video gamey finesse, and Toree hits those exact sort of daydreams for me. But of course, that abstract fashion won't be the first thing that immediately shocks you here. So, Toree originated as a demo within a compilation of low-poly horror indie games, the Haunted PS1 demo disc, and developer Siactro has previously worked on horror games of that variety, which does mean that Toree has a number of horror surprises, surreal stuff if you really go out of your way to find them, and spoilers, at least 2 significant jump scares, which got me for obvious reasons. What's surprising to me though is how little these moments actually affect the core gameplay, which I think was a good decision. They're just attractions that are there to shock you from your seat at worst, or in the best cases, incentivize speedrunning in clever ways, like how one level in Toree 2 makes you climb a crumbling tower before this pink monstrosity consumes the level. Horrifying stuff, but the need to run away from it kinda works here, doesn't it? Now some people may find these things distracting, or even question why they're here if the game isn't a full-on horror show. But there's something cool, I think, about a platformer that stays true to itself in spite of the plainly cursed moments surrounding it. It's not some cute game that amalgamates into a cursed, subversive horror experience. It's a series of games that all kick off with some horrific, glitchy entity stealing Toree's ice cream. The gameplay doesn't diverge into getting consumed by the fears of the unknown, but on the simple chase for the sweets, as you defy and turn your chick's cheek against any scary-looking thing that may cross your path. The final levels of both games especially bring home this feeling to me. No matter how wretched the reality, it's still a speedrunning joyride for Toree. On that note, Toree 3D has some pretty fun levels, but I did come out of replays thinking that some of its ideas do wear kinda thin to the intended flow of the game. Moments like catching treadmills or diving down massive icy slides are great, but sections like having to slowly ascend up fans, or wait on floating platforms, or incoming cars where their perceived acceleration and depth aren't entirely clear, do feel like abrupt stopgaps. Fans in particular work pretty well when they're pushing you horizontally, but putting Toree's pace up to the mercy of air momentum tends to take away from the tight and accurate appeal of the controls as is. We can debate all day about whether games with a focus on speed and flow require considerate platforming and slow moments or not, but I think what my gut would tell me is that I don't exactly need a game to be fast all the time, but I do expect the potential to parkour them to be possible, even if a level doesn't initially appear viable for speed. Which is honestly how most of Toree 3D goes down, just not with those exceptions I mentioned earlier. I've currently been discussing both Toree 3D and Toree 2 in tandem, since the sequel doesn't dramatically innovate too much about the first game, but I will say its levels and gimmicks came across as more consistent and fun for me. Tropes here feel a lot snappier to get in the swing of. You got rings in the air that shoot you into a dash, green gates that give you speed and invincibility. Even the level themes are a lot more thrilling, invading a high-security secret base with shafts that lift you in an instant, a set of ruins remodeled into a water park, making fun patterns out of fluid paths and bouncy beach chairs. And pretty much everything about these spaceship Armada levels left me speechless, what can I say? Toree speed isn't a natural ability, but something that gets uniquely expressed through tight control combos and level gimmicks, leaving a ton of room for experimentation, even if follow-ups aren't necessarily innovative. I'd still be on board if follow-ups just kept crafting more and more gimmicks around this super solid formula, which has been the case so far. Toree not only surpasses expectations with its looks and control quality, but also in value through its copious bonus contents. Collecting all the stars and S ranks in both entries unlocks other playable characters based on Siactro's previous projects, each with their own differences from Toree, either being faster or being able to jump endlessly. This Macbeth character in particular makes for a nice little free roam debug mode to get a good glimpse at the construction of levels. Let's not also forget that in addition to these unlockables, both of these games had free post-game DLC content. Toree 3D got a set of new remix levels in the form of Jumble Jam, created by one of the level designers in their spare time, that really goes all out, getting wackier and admittedly more entertaining with the original game's assets. And Toree 2 had Christmas-themed levels. The most interesting ones involved Toree gameplay in a hypothetical sandbox collectathon structure. This actually works a lot better than I thought it would. Toree's twitchy gameplay complements the race to optimize nearby objectives in an open space pretty neatly. It's the enjoyment of linear Toree, but with a cross-country edge to it. A promising little experiment there. Getting all of that, in addition to fun low-poly vibes, surprises, and fine-tuned controls, are what make the Toree games worth more than the buck they're labeled with. Normally, I don't factor in a game's price to this degree, if any, in a review, since I often feel it would hurt my overall assessment of a game's quality when tying it to some arbitrary number. But this is a case where I think recognizing how it was being sold is important. It was an easy gateway, but one with more than you'd ask for, both content and creatively speaking. I reached out to Marcus, aka Siactro, to ask him what inspired Toree's eye-catching gameplay and selling price, and ultimately what he hopes people would take away from playing these games. And he had this to say. To be fully honest with you, the main inspiration to start this game was to see if people would enjoy a very small game like that for a really low price. That's why I started it to begin with. However, after 2 weeks, I took a break and ultimately came back to it with a, whatever, I want to make something that I actually want to make mindset. So a lot about it changed because I started focusing on what movement, game feel, and overall gameplay felt good to me. If you enjoy something this simple and minimalistic and have thought about making something creative on your own, no matter if a game or not, but felt like you don't know enough about the craft just yet, seriously, just go ahead and do it. Make a small 2 weeks project and release it, whatever it is. If you really think Toree is good and want to work on creative things yourself, you're probably already way better at this stuff than I am, so just go ahead and do it. Oh, and show me what you made, please. Always open to steal good ideas. And that really puts the game's appeal into perspective. Now that the review portion of this video is done, I can say on a personal note that those words spoke to me as someone who wants to be a better, more consistent writer and video producer. Sometimes you need a reminder that it's all a matter of doing something and not being afraid to revise it. So in its own weird and, again, unexpected way, Toree really did inspire me. It's definitely more than I could ever ask for just $2.